Atelier Firis is the second game in the mysterious trilogy and follows an earnest girl named Fierce and her sister Leanne as they leave their cloistered underground city and go on a journey spanning their sprawling nation. The unique hook of Atelier Firis is that it attempts to be an open-world adventure, unusual for a series that normally relies on small area maps connected through an overworld. This melds perfectly with the narrative of young Fierce, who has lived her entire life underground and yearns for the freedom of the surface. This is encapsulated in the opening movie for the game with striking visuals and a soaring ballad called Flora, which was the first piece of music from the Atelier series that I purchased for casual listening. Unfortunately, the wide open spaces of Fierce are a double-edged sword, but for now let's take a look at the game as a whole and circle back to that later. Visually, Fierce is a bit of a mixed bag. Character designs for the main cast are great, although their textures can look a bit flat depending on the lighting. NPCs come in a limited assortment that repeats fairly often, but look good for background characters. Environments feel a bit stale, a result of having to stretch their limited art assets over such vast distances, but environmental effects like fog, sandstorms, and other weather look great and add a lot of atmosphere. Poppin' is a regular occurrence and at times is comical, such as when a massive ship materializes in the ocean you've been running towards for over a minute. Sound is where Fierce really shines. Japanese voiceovers are great, ambient effects such as the rumble of a thunderstorm or the pattering of rain are unusually good. Music is the true standout for this game, breathing a lot of life into the long stretches of travel that you will endure. The composers deserve a lot of credit for the beautiful soundtrack, most of which is enjoyable to listen to even outside the game. English dubbing is also available for the game, though the quality is hit or miss. The main characters, Fierce and Leanne, are both memorable and likable. While not as comedic as Sophie and Plachta, both of which join the cast of this game as well, Fierce and Leanne's relationship is entertaining and eventually shown to have great depth in several quests later in the game. Fierce possesses an earnestness that's extremely endearing and authentic. Her naivete about the world and people outside of her isolated mining community is used as a vehicle to help the player look on the world with the same wonder she does. This works for quite some time, although traveling through the world eventually does become a slog later. The cast of the game can feel a bit small due to the fact that so many characters from Atelier Sophie join up with Fierce, but memorable additions like Contrary Ilmaria and Scatterbrain Drossel manage to leave their marks. In terms of polish, Fierce benefits greatly from the latest patches to fix some quirky bugs that came with the launch edition, but otherwise works fine. Loading times for each region are surprisingly fast given the scale of some of the areas. Unfortunately, this grand scale becomes a detriment later in the game due to a very limited fast travel system that leaves players hiking through the same maps over and over. This is compounded by quests that enjoy sending you from one side of the country to the other in a stamina system that requires frequent resting to continue traveling. Options for fast travel open up later in the game, but far too late to prevent player fatigue and frustration. It doesn't help that every region feels 3 times larger than it needs to be, with far too much useless space. This is especially felt in the game's cities, which are bland-looking mazes with only a tiny population of NPCs to break the monotony. The game also features a generous time limit to complete the main quest, so much so that it may as well have been left out of the game entirely. Now for the value, where I estimate how much the game is worth. Atelier Firis is a good buy if you can find it for less than $40. With dated visuals, an oversized open world that quickly grows dull, and excessive travel time, the problems of Atelier Firis keep it from being one of the best from the series. Its stirring musical score, memorable main characters and fun story are a treat though, and at times it sparkles behind the rough edges. Atelier Firis suffers mostly from being an experimental entry in the Atelier series. While its bold ideas about open-world design don't quite pan out and it's one of the last titles to use a time limit system, the narrative sets up several satisfying conclusions in its sequel Atelier Lydie and Sue. As for what is needed, most of Atelier Firis's difficulties stem from design decisions that couldn't be changed after the fact, and many of the lessons learned from its development have been implemented in its successors. What I would like to see going forward is a return of this cast in a future game, the way Atelier Lulu revisited the Arlen trilogy. Overall, I would recommend Atelier Firis to fans of the series willing to invest a lot of time and patience into exploring its world and numerous mysteries. Have you played Atelier Firis? I'd love to hear your take on it in the comments below. This has been moevalue. Thank you for the privilege of your time and I hope to see you again.